Hello and welcome to AutoInform Tool Supplement. My name's Frank Massey, and what we'd like to do is introduce some of the tools that we rely on and have developed both in use and procedure over all the years of repairing vehicles. And what we'd like to do is try and perhaps remove some of the emphasis from technology and some of the more complex tests into some of the very effective means that we test systems using various tools, pressure, vacuum, mechanical tools and gauges. Introduce you to the possibilities of introducing these into the procedures that you may adopt in your workshop. To begin, I'd like to discuss a pump that we've developed when dealing with diesel common rail. One of the great problems with diesel common rail is the quality of the fuel in the tank. And it's always one of the issues you should consider very early on in your evaluation. The great danger is if the fuel's contaminated, if you attach gauges and other tools, back leakage tools perhaps, high pressure testing tools, you may introduce and cross-contaminate the tools with the debris or whatever the fluid is in the tank. So we decided that we wanted to extract fuel in fairly high volumes. Perhaps you want to drain the tank, perhaps you want to transfer fuel from a known good clean container into the tank. And we wanted to do this in as effective a method as possible. So we searched to find a suitable pump. What we came up with was a battery operated, very compact, fairly high volume pump. What we decided to do was to modify the fittings to our standard self-sealing couplings so that we could then purchase the relevant fittings. So if you have a particular vehicle application where the manufacturer's fittings are unique, and they often are these days, then you can adapt those fittings to these quick release self-sealing couplings. The benefit of this is you have a professional fitting on the vehicle. It will not introduce air into the system, which is an important issue. And we use the pump in several ways, so I'd like to discuss some of the ways which we use it. First of all, if you consider the tank may have some contamination, I would argue you want to draw some fuel off in fairly high volume so that you can physically examine the fuel. So you can use the pump to extract the fuel into a container and physically look at the fuel. You can also, if you're pulling the fuel through the filter, I suggest that you leave the filter in situ. So you have your tank, your filtration, and then your pump in that order. By pulling the fuel through the filter at high speed, any contamination will be more effectively drawn into the filter element. You can then remove the filter element, perhaps when you empty the tank entirely if you have a serious consideration, and examine the filter itself. By doing that, you're also partly protecting the pump from contamination, but one of the considerations in choosing this particular pump was the fact that we can actually dismantle the pumping element and clean it out should there be contamination, because once again we also use this pump for priming systems up. Now, one of the problems with diesel common rail, I'm sure some of you have found this, if the system relies upon vacuum extraction of the fuel, in other words the fuel is drawn from the tank under the influence of a vacuum created by the high pressure pump, having dismantled the system, maybe emptied the tank, maybe changed the fuel filter, they're often very difficult to prime up. So once again, the principle is having fueled the tank, so you can use this to fill the tank, having fueled the tank, change the fuel filter, we can then use this pump to draw fuel directly through the filter with the manufacturer's fitting, with a self-sealing coupling, into a container. So without the need of cranking the car or vehicle excessively, this will prime a filter up. We can also, if you've stripped the main high pressure system down, reverse that logic and use this pump to directly prime the high pressure system. So in other words, we are directly feeding fuel into the high pressure pump, and we've actually used this whilst cranking the vehicle, and it primes that system up incredibly quickly. All that remains then to be done is to remove the pump from the circuit, replace the pipe between the filter and the high pressure pump inlet, and the vehicle's up and primed. So it's a number of applications. Obviously, you may need the use of extension hoses, and these are very easily added to the system should that be the case. You could add extra filtration if you felt it necessary. So whatever you want to do with these fittings is entirely flexible. 12 volt operation, very high flow rate. You'll empty a 60-70 litre tank in probably under 5 minutes or so. So it's a very effective tool. We've had great success. We've had a lot of trouble with certain vehicles. Mondeo comes to mind, and other Ford Transits, where priming the system up has been quite a time-consuming and messy business up until now. So it's certainly a tool that we've relied upon.